Hi, everybody. Going to give it a minute while attendees start to come in and participants are led into the webinar room. And in just a moment, we'll go ahead and get started. All right. It has slowed down just enough for me to feel comfortable to get started. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for attending this webinar today. My name is Kate Tallman. I'm the head of Library Liaison Services at Illinois State University. And I'm also the, chair of the Help I'm an Accidental Government Information Librarian webinar series. Um, Today's webinar is brought to you by the ALA Government Documents Roundtable, or GODORT, in partnership with the ACRL Politics, Policy, International Relations Committee, or PIPERS. We have a really amazing panel today, as you will see, to talk about disappearing data and disappearing government information, a topic that we are all intimately familiar with. So I'm going to let our colleagues from PIPERS talk a little bit more about the impetus for this webinar. Very quickly, you are welcome to chat questions anytime. We will keep track of those and ask them at the end of the webinar. We are going to be giving each speaker a few minutes to talk about their projects. Then we're going to ask each of them individual questions, and then we're going to ask them a group of questions that they can answer together in a discussion format. And then we will open it up to you for questions as well. So that's going to be the general structure of today's talk. In the meantime, I'm going to hand it over to Julia Ezzo. Julia is the chair-elect of GODORT and the current chair of GODORT's program committee. She is the Government Information and Political Science Librarian at Michigan State University. So Julia, go right ahead.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you everyone for attending today's incredibly timely webinar on grassroots efforts to address disappearing federal government information. We've gathered a wonderful panel of 3 experts who are in the trenches working hard to preserve critical government information and ensure continued free access for all. I'll now pass it over to my PIPERS colleagues, Jennifer Horn and Heather Gatze.
Jennifer, you are muted.
You're muted.
Okay, I'll start over. I'm sorry. I'm Jennifer Horn. I am the Business and Government Information Librarian at the University of Kentucky. And along with Heather Getze, I am the co-chair of the PIPERS Professional Development Committee. Back in April, PIPERS held a discussion about the unstable federal data environment. And it was very, very popular. And it was so popular that we had to restrict attendance or else it was going to be out of control for a discussion group with no agenda and no speakers. So we knew that we needed to work to put on a more formal webinar with speakers. And we were very happy to hook up with GODORT to be part of this webinar series to put this on today. And now I will pass this along to Heather.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Getze. I'm the Social Sciences and Government Information Librarian at Slippery Rock University of Pennsylvania. As Jennifer said, I'm co-chair along with her of the PIPERS Professional Development Committee. And we'd like to welcome our speakers today. We're so thankful to have their participation for this session. I'm going to provide a brief introduction for our speakers. I want to encourage them to share any additional information that they might want to do so regarding their backgrounds as they share their information today. So joining us today, we have Molly Blake, who is Social Sciences Librarian at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where she serves as liaison to the Economics, Educational Psychology, and Political Science departments, and also to the Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communication. She has additional professional experience in teaching, writing, research, and nonprofit work. We also have joining us Jack Cushman, who is director of the Harvard Library Innovation Lab, a software and design lab at the Harvard Law School Library. He is a software engineer and appellate attorney who previously worked as lead developer of the Case Law Access Project and has served as a lecturer on computer programming at Harvard Law School. And we also have Dr. Linda Kellum, who is one of the founding organizers of the Data Rescue Project and the Snyder Granider Director of Research Data and Digital Scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. She has authored and edited works on data and librarianship and has presented extensively on data services, data management, and FAIR guidelines. We want to thank all of them for joining us today, and we're going to start things off with Molly Blake.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm just going to share my screen quick. And is it letting me do that? Let me see. Yep. All right. Fantastic. So I just wanted to start today by sharing the team behind this very new project, and thank you so much for this opportunity to chat a little bit about this project. This project was really brainstormed by my colleague, Jenny McBurney, and Jenny and I have been working closely over the past 8 weeks to just really kind of get things off the ground. And I'm very happy to share that just in the past few weeks, Tracking Government Information has been joined by 2 other fantastic librarians, Sangha at the University of Illinois and Ben at Sacramento State. So like probably all of you in this room, in February of 2025, Jenny and I started to get really concerned with what was happening with government information. And one event in particular sort of inspired us to take action. 2 of our colleagues over at the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota shared that a journal article they had written for a CDC-operated journal had been removed from the CDC website. Fortunately, with the February 11th ruling that CDC data had to go back up, their journal article also went back up. But as these researchers pointed out in their article, this was not the only instance of government information being taken down. And one they pointed to was videos of the January 6th insurrection were removed from, I believe, the Justice Department website around this time. And then the other thing that happened, as I'm sure all of you know, in March, the Trump administration started releasing all these memos banning a very long list of language to be included in government publications moving forward. And so that really underscored to Jenny and myself that we needed to do something to track what was going on. We knew that there were really excellent efforts going on, such as the Data Rescue Project to rescue data. And so that made us wonder, is anyone sort of tracking everything else, photographs, videos, websites, etc. And so we decided to start a crowdsourcing project. So right now our goal is to help researchers and just members of the general public see the scope of everything that the Trump administration has removed from government websites and to locate archived copies whenever available. Fortunately, quite a bit, if not everything, is available in the Wayback Machine, but it's about connecting those dots. And I'm sharing here, and I will share it in the chat when I'm done speaking, our current working website. And as of right now, there's a form where absolutely anyone is welcome to submit anything that they see is missing. It can just be a title of a document or a broken link. We're happy to investigate further on the back end. And then that form feeds into a spreadsheet so that folks can kind of take a peek of what has been shared already and sort by things such as agency. I believe as of today, we have about 100 entries. So we're just really happy to be able to just be continuing to collect this information. So what has been removed other than data? For the sake of time, I'm not going to read this slide, but I think it gives you kind of a good sense of the breadth of what has gone away at this point. Some of you may have heard it was just announced that all of Trump's speech transcripts have been removed from the remarks page of the government website, the whitehouse.gov website. We have working papers that have been removed. Tools that help researchers look at data or work with government documents have been removed. And maybe the most famous example of an entire website going down. 2 or 3 weeks ago, the covid.gov website started rerouting to this interestingly designed website about the quote unquote true origins of COVID-19. So that was once a website where you could get information about treatment options and vaccine safety. That has all been removed. So we are still in the early days of our project, and we are currently kind of expanding and growing. The next goal we have is we are in the process of developing a search interface to make it easier for users to explore what people have submitted. And then we're also looking into options for expanding our project moving forward. Two possible routes we might go down is we're interested in tracking things like office and agency closures that are going to impact the information ecosystem, already have impacted it. So I imagine quite a few of you today were maybe at the EBSS webinar this morning, where we all heard from Erin Pollard-Young about how the decimation of the education department has impacted ERIC. So that would be one of several examples of how these budget cuts are then impacting information we have the right to receive as members of the public. And then the second area where we're interested in expanding is this ongoing, really terrible issue of language censorship. Since the initial list of banned words came out in March, this hasn't gone away. Just this past week, The Guardian reported that State Department employees had received a memo that they are no longer allowed to use the term racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism, which has very profound impacts about how white supremacist violence, the #1 form of terrorism in our country, gets described and tracked on government websites and resources. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I look forward to chatting with you all further.
Thanks so much. Shall I pick it up from here? Let me share my slides. All right, so I'm Jack. I direct the Library Innovation Lab, which is a group at the Harvard Law Library that explores the future of access to information. And we try to take the library principles that we all share and bring those to wherever people are getting their information today. We sort of believe as a core principle at the lab, one of the core things that we're trying to solve is the preservation of cultural memory on the web, that it is on thin ice across the board, because in the same way that information on the internet wants to be free, it also wants to exist in only one copy. We're no longer starting with, 10,000 books and 10,000 libraries and winnowing down. We're starting from a real economic pressure to go down to one copy that we all refer to. And we're here to talk about public data, so that's very true of things like data.gov, but it's also true of the YouTube videos, where there's countless culturally valuable YouTube videos that if YouTube changed a policy, they'd go away. It's true of paywalls. There's countless articles that if they were changed, it'd be very hard to show that they had been changed. We have a across-the-board cultural memory problem that we all need to invent strategies for solving. So that's a big picture aspect of what we're thinking about as a lab. With public data, there's this real pressing need to preserve the stuff that we all care about because America runs on data. Spending some time browsing data.gov as we started to preserve it at the end of last year, there are endless data sets where you look and say, I sure hope someone is tracking that. I hope someone is tracking how much water is left in the aquifers, which crops are growing, which places are overcrowded, and which places are a good place to build. We desperately need a view of all of the things that we are doing as a society. And what we anticipated in November, and what turned out to be true, I think probably more than anyone anticipated, is that the priorities of the federal government in providing those things drastically changed. I list here some, but not all, of the agencies that have had their missions drastically curtailed or changed just in the last few months. That are agencies involved in public data, in access to the information that we all use to navigate through our lives. There are so many, and this is not the full list, but there's a huge shift in what information is being offered and processed and preserved. And so we face this question, can we archive the government? And of course, not all of it, but we did dive into a little piece of it. So at the Library Innovation Lab, we decided to take on archiving data.gov. Data.gov is an index, metadata map of about 300,000 data sets across the federal government. And we were told over and over, well, that's not all of them. There's a lot more to get, but this was like a place to start. So we made a 17 terabyte index of those 300,000 data sets, just the direct files that were linked out from each entry on data.gov, which means in some cases we missed a lot because it would be just like a homepage of a bunch of other data that's somewhere else. But if it did link directly to the data files, we would get that. Um, and we really went into doing this work because we were talking to folks like the End of Term Archive, who do wonderful work archiving a full snapshot of the federal web before and after each transition. But really realizing that that process of clicking from link to link to preserve things would miss links rendered by JavaScript and very deep links and links where you have to email to get a data set or do an FTP or links where you have to run a bunch of searches and aggregate them, that anything that was specific data could be missed. So you'd end up with a manual to our public data, but not the data itself. And that's what motivated this diving in to get the data. We thought really hard in doing this about how do we make it resilient and redundant, because I don't want to count on, Harvard still being around in order to have our archive still be around. I want it to be resilient across repositories. So we made it using standard self-explanatory formats, using Library of Congress bags formats. We added a metadata signing standard. So each one of our archives comes with a cryptographic signature showing that we made it and the timestamp that we made it. So it is very hard to fake. And we're working now, it's not launched, on an interface that will let you do discovery of all of this in your browser without any server-side component, which means that we've heard there's copies in the UK and Australia and so on. Those copies will work just as well as our original. You would have the same provenance, the same sort of integrity, accuracy of the thing, and the same browsing tools if you make a copy as with the original. And that's really where a lot of our research is going. We're working on publishing the tools for that. So the core tool that we use for making those 300,000 archives is a tool I got to name called Bag Nabbit, which makes bags that are signed. And this is open source, free for other people to use and adopt and remix to make their own authenticated bags. Um, and what we learned in the process, and I hope I'm setting up Linda here, you have to wear so many expert hats to do effective archiving of public data. The work that, and I wore a lot of these hats, I was like trying to pretend to be so many experts that I'm not, to do the mapping of what exists, the narrowing in on what to prioritize, once you identified a data set, the data librarianship to figure out, well, which versions of the file and which metadata files and which documentation constitute this archive. The programming and for skill to download it, the sort of process skill to package it with the right metadata and the right signatures, the systemic skill to get it into the archives it needs to be in so that it will be preserved resiliently. And then the sort of access and discovery layer that is needed so that people can find the thing that they need. And then once you've done all of that, you have to figure out how to update that pipeline as new data comes out. It just became desperately apparent that we can't just go do this. We need a community to do it together. So Linda, please tell us how that can possibly happen. And we ended up with a set of research questions that our lab is thinking about. One of which is, where will that collaboration happen? How will the library community and the technical community be able to come together to be all the kinds of experts that we have to be? How do we staff the core community organizing that has to happen around all the expertise that is at the edges of this? Two, where are we going to do the resilient data preservation for this? I don't know about everyone else. The world is too big for me to say this with confidence, but I know that in the part of it I can see, we are too much on fragile archives, on things that can be lost because we can't take everything, or because if we go away, it'll go away, because if someone orders us to change our policy, it'll change. We need archives that are resilient to the kind of shock that we're going through now. And I think that means going back to the era of locks, lots of copies keep stuff safe, and asking what locks of 2025 looks like, including the actual locks project at Stanford, of course, but also taking their concept of resilient digital storage and expanding it. And finally, to think about what knowledge producers should learn to not let this happen again. So going back to that first slide about YouTube is vulnerable and the New York Times is vulnerable, and anyone who is a primary publisher of something they care about is at risk of this kind of loss. Using this moment to say, how can you structure your publications so that our work as archivists gets easier? So that's the stuff that we're thinking about, and we'd love to continue the conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Jack. I hadn't seen this presentation before, so that's really exciting to hear that's your conversation right now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Data Rescue Project, how it got started and what we're working on as well, and thinking about the future. So the Data Rescue Project started started coming together in January of 2025, but really formally came together in February. But started as a group of members of these organizations. These are primarily data professionals organizations. iAssist is international. RDAP is primarily US, Canada focused. And Data Curation Network is a consortium of universities with institutional repositories for data. And we were really concerned about the fact that we had patrons who were looking for CDC data sets, in particular, or USAID data, and we wanted to help them find alternate sources in that particular moment. So it really started as a crowdsourced way to try and find sources of places where data was backed up, or sources of the alternate sources of data. And then it became more of a data rescue focused organization. We've been doing this, unlike last time in 2017, and we do come out of the 2017 effort. They are our grandmothers and fathers, I would call them. Unlike that period, we are focused on asynchronous data rescues. So we had to come up with a workflow people could use asynchronously, whereas back in 2017, a lot of the work was being done at data rescue events. And we knew we didn't have time to do that. We needed to spin something up within a week at the most, to go after data that we perceived would be at risk. And so we created this data inventory spreadsheet and workflow that I am proud to say is still going strong. And I back it up every day, but it is still a lot of people in there working. But it provides the good thing about this, and going to Jack's point, this provides a data curation workflow that people can use as they're going in to target specific data sets for rescue, and gives them as much information as possible about how to think about a data set as a unique object with a lot of other objects that go with it, as a kind of a package that needs to be preserved for the long term. And this is one of the things you'll see on this as well, is that we worked also with Interterm Web Archive, Internet Archive, Wayback Machine, and to nominate the web pages that these data sets were coming from for crawling. But we also wanted these data sets to go into a place that was built for data. That was a major goal for us. And so that place ended up being ICPSR's Data Lumos. ICPSR is based out of the University of Michigan. It's a data archive that's been around since, I think, 1963. So it's a long-standing reputation. And in 2017 or so, they built Data Lumos, which is meant to be a crowdsourced repository for federal data. That repository, as of January 2025, had about, I think, 100 data sets from the 2017 era. Since then, we've put about 500 in to this repository. And we know, I got statistics and I totally forgot them, but we know that from February to April, end of April, there were about 6,000 downloads of those, and that's gone up exponentially. So I think it's up in the 20,000 downloads at this point of these data sets that have been put in since February 2025. So people are looking at the data. We'd love to know how people are using the data as well, but right now we do know that they are being downloaded. In addition to the data rescue project, or the data rescue efforts that we wanted to learn from last time, and one of our big things was to make sure that we knew where data was going. We did not think we would ever be the only group working on this, so we wanted to partner with other groups like EDGI, PEDP, Jack, Library Innovation Lab, and other groups that were doing data rescues to try and make a catalog of those rescue efforts. And that's what our data rescue tracker does. It provides the original locations as well as the backup links, the URLs to the backups for a wide range of data rescues. You will see repeats in here, and this goes to Jack's point about lots of copies. You'll see different versions of Eric, for instance, one called Erica, which you may have seen. It's a beautiful site someone made from the Internet Archive's backup of Eric. And we are thinking right now about other places, other sources of data we might be able to create interfaces using both the data sets that we have and the backups that would be in the Internet Archive. So there is an interface hopefully coming soon. It's been a lot of work to try and get this done, but this current interface, you can go and look at, and I can put the links in the chat. Another big part for us is thinking about data stories and how do we tell the stories about the importance of public data as a public good. That this is something that the government needs to be doing, gathering this data for for us to be able to understand our country. And so we have a submission form for collecting data use stories, and we've published a couple of these, and I have some more coming. But if you are interested in telling your story about a data set, how it's been useful for you or how it might be useful for understanding your community, feel free to do that. I know Civic Switchboard also did a version of this as a data rescue event, which I find really exciting. So if you think that might be something that would be interesting to your people, get in touch with us and I can connect you to them. And then if you are interested in doing more, please get in touch, and just sharing the information about this and talking about public data is helping. So make sure you're doing that, even if you don't have time to rescue data or help with a tracker or any of the more advanced things that we do. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you all so much for sharing about your fantastic projects. We'll now move on to individual questions for each panelist. Molly, what tools, training, or partnerships are most effective in starting or expanding a crowdsourced project such as yours?
Yeah, so I would just start by saying I feel incredibly fortunate to be in an institution and a department that really supported Jenny and I kind of going for this. And I think the three things I would really say you need support of other people. And this was one place where we were just really lucky to have a lot of colleagues at the University of Minnesota Libraries that were interested in helping us with sort of beta testing our form to make sure we knew that if something was confusing for a librarian, it would be really confusing for somebody who doesn't work with information all day, every day. And we were also just really lucky to be able to lean on the efforts that others have done. One particular person I want to give a shout out to is Kelly Smith at UC San Diego, has a really fantastic weekly roundup every week where she compiles a lot of the stuff that we're interested in, like things that have gone down from government websites, but also other news stories where we really want to keep our eye on how is this impacting the information ecosystem. Kelly gave us permission to take that list and kind of put it into our own spreadsheet. And then what we did is we kind of had a series of working lunches that we just invited our colleagues to come to, where they helped us take the sites that Kelly had already found, and we had vetted them a little bit to make sure they were appropriate for our particular project, and then put them into the form so we could see how it went into the spreadsheet, and then they could give us feedback. And that was really wonderful because I'm a social sciences librarian. Jenny is a government publications librarian. We got to get insights from science librarians, from catalogers, from people with different areas of expertise. So I would just say, and yes, thank you for throwing Kelly's weekly roundup in the chat. It's a phenomenal resource. So I think just getting interested people and then being willing to just kind of, we made a decision at a certain point where we were kind of like, is anyone else doing this? Should we wait? And we decided we really just wanted to get the project off the ground because the process of developing it, we knew would be iterative and we needed feedback and support from other people because it was a crowdsourcing project to kind of take it to the next step. So I'd say also just the boldness to like start when it's time to start.
Thank you, Molly. The next question is for Jack. And the question is, what strategies are you putting in place to ensure the long-term sustainability of the archive?
Yeah. So I got to talk a bit about this in my introduction, but I'll expand on it. I think as we try to take on these very broad challenges, these are like huge numbers of data sets that need to be preserved. I never even have managed to estimate the size of the problem we're taking on because even deputy US CTOs don't know how much data the federal government has. As we try to take on these very large things, I think we need to be mindful of the limits of our own institutions and capacities, that we can't say like, I have it, therefore it's fine forever. We have to say, I have it, therefore I can help others to have it. So I think trying to learn as much as we can from the sort of successes and failures of digital archives is really important. Um, and the kind of, there's a whole crop of like digital humanities projects that like launched and shared new access to something and then ran out of funding and then shut back down. And it was like, well, there was access for a while and now there's an archive of an archive. To make things upfront as cheap and resilient as possible is my lab's approach to this. And I'm conscious that I'm saying this thoughtfully because I think there's other approaches. You can have a big institution that says, we're going to keep this and we'll make sure that we stick around. It'll be fine. But I think we also have to think about making something that doesn't rely on any one of us. So I mentioned some of the strategies there. If you use cryptographic signatures and timestamps, you can make sure that the copies are just as convincing as the originals. And I think that'll become really important as we have copies going around. If you use self-documenting archive formats that if you just got a disk and handed it to someone, they could make sense of how you think about your archive, that becomes so much easier to copy and share. And there's a lot of room to kind of build on like the great work that's gone into standards like Bagot for making things that are kind of self-documenting. If we put them on hosts so that the copy is easy to make. The data.gov archive, for example, is on Source Co-op, which is a nonprofit that donates space on Amazon S3. And the whole thing is one big folder layout. So if you want a copy of my entire archive, that's like a one command that it's a copy that'll take a long time to run, but all it's doing is downloading the whole layout. I think like redesigning our archives to be very simple and low moving part and designed to be like, like the Soviet Jeep that can't fall apart because it's just very simple parts that you can always put them back together and they work. That's what I'm looking for how to do this resilience. And then I think what we can build on that is an international community that looks out for each other and that has a kind of international solidarity to it. This is a real moment for us all to look up and say, I can't count on any nonprofit in the United States continuing to have an interest in preserving the stuff that I care about. I've found so much like reassurance, I guess, insight and support from people who have been working in other very different situations for a long time where they're trying to preserve things that are hard. A group of Tibetan democracy activists who like for decades have been working on a challenge that is extremely different from mine, but deep and important challenge, who will come and say, hey, we know some things that you might want to know. We could help you out. And I think if we really invest in those international relationships to help each other out to provide long-term resilience, that's what I'd like to see for durability. And I mean, I'm at the Harvard Law Library where I don't know if you saw, we just announced we have a like Magna Carta from 1300. Like we have, books over in the vault that are from before the printing press or bound in metal and stuff. And like we're good at keeping things for a long time, but we should never say like, therefore we'll be the ones who keep the copy. We should say, therefore we made it really easy to have lots of copies of this thing.
Linda, I have the next question for you. You've been involved with the Data Rescue Project from the start. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned about organizing large-scale data preservation efforts and how the project has evolved over time?
Yeah, and this will go, I'm sorry, I'm laughing because that was great what you said, Jack. This will go directly with what Jack was saying, and that I think when we started, I mean, one of the truths of why this project has been so powerful is because the data community came out and said, we're going to do this, we're going to be part of this conversation because these are the things we care about, and we had tremendous backing from a wide number of organizations. But I think what really helped us is that we weren't territorial about it, right? It wasn't a matter of saying this is our space, stay out. It was a matter of saying, okay, who wants to help, who wants to come into this? Everybody's got to be a part of this. And that I think DRP is a great example of that, because we have one of our steering committee members is from Sucho, which is a group called Saving Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online. He organized that effort in 2022 and then came to us and said, okay, here's how we did it. Here's the tips I would give you. Plus, we were able to learn from the previous data rescue efforts and from Initerm Web Archive and from Jack and from all of these efforts that were going on. PEDP is another, the Public Environmental Data Partners is another one that was doing this. But we wanted to find our niche. And so being able to find our niche, but also work with others and not cut other people out of that process, I think is what made it impactful and successful. And that is where we've really evolved from being kind of this just, okay, the data community is going to do, we care about data, we're going to do data, to much more of having bigger conversations about things that go outside of just data sets. And a lot of the contacts we get are people asking us, well, what do I do about this particular thing that's not data set? And we can connect them to the right people because we've stayed open and connected to the entire community. So yeah, oh yay, yeah, thanks for putting that. Yeah, that's how we've evolved over time. We are still thinking about our future and where do we go next. So I think we're continuously evolving. And every month I feel like I'm saying, well, is it over yet? Have we hit the, are we going to sunset now? And realizing, no, there's still things we have to do. And so ask me in another month where my head is at for that question.
Thanks, Linda. So we're going to ask a few questions for the whole group to answer of panelists, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So this question gets at how big the problem actually is, because I think I know nobody here has an actual answer, like it's this much has disappeared. But how do we sort of measure the scope of this problem? And is there a reliable way for us to measure or track really how much government information or how much data has actually disappeared? That's a big question. So I'll open it up to any of you to start answering.
Journalists ask us this all the time. So to be quite frank, I was hoping with the Tracking GovInfo project there would be more of a quantifiable element to this, but it's a really hard. We can say this, I think, from agency to agency, probably more so than across the entire government. But Jack, you were gonna.
Yeah, I think there's a real kind of tooling gap here because we're kind of, the community that I've been part of has been focused on making copies of the thing. And then to answer a question like when the CDC website went down and then came back up after an executive order, exactly what changed? There is tooling that could exist to answer that question based on end-of-term archive crawls, for example. But I don't know that it does exist robustly, that we have answers on the time frame that people need them about what changed. So it's one of those frustrating, like we have the data, but we don't have the way to ask the question of the data yet. And that's really specific to the things that can get into the crawl. When you get into the data that is deep web, like stuff that is not crawlable, I think it gets even less possible to answer. You get this kind of, we found like one link on data.gov that goes to an archive that turns out to be petabytes of weather data. And like, there's a whole question about how you do your denominator there. Like, first of all, we didn't know those petabytes existed, so raise your estimate by that much. Second of all, does that count? Or are you going to say, well, that one we actually just don't have storage for, we're going to write that off. And if the government can't save it, no one can. You might say, this megabyte over here is much more important than this petabyte over here. Let's save a bunch of those. And how do you measure your progress when you save this megabyte, but not that petabyte? So I'm left back to, I have no denominator here for a sense of what we've lost or what we have. It would be really helpful in talking to my funders to have better answers to that. So I think I love the idea of getting better answers. And I think one way to approach it would be to work from the requests that we have and the requests that reference librarians get to start to understand, what do we think is missing from it, just practical, our patrons trying to answer questions. As far as I know, that infrastructure doesn't exist at a large scale either, and I'd have to hear more about that.
And yeah, I just have to echo what both Linda and Jack are saying. And our project is maybe especially challenging because we very intentionally want to capture things that aren't just quantitative data, but then those things are even harder to measure, right? Like and I know this will get in, we're going to talk about this further, but there's also a tricky thing when you're tracking like things like language changes to make sure you're not confusing innocuous changes with things that have been deliberately changed for reasons of censorship. So I don't know if it's totally possible to, definitively say this is the scope of the problem. I really like Jack's framing around going back to the patrons, going back to users. What do people need? And certainly our project came up in part because of like questions we were getting from faculty around specific things that they want to make sure that they're able to access moving forward. And again, that's why we kind of did a crowdsourced project, but it's just kind of trying to get as much as we can so people understand the breadth of things, but I don't know if there's really a way to quantify everything that's been lost.
Molly started to get into this a little bit, but on a related note, how can we differentiate between routine activities and updates and intentional removal of government data and information?
I'll add something to that, though. It's not just that binary. It's also the contract situation. So I think there's the focus on tensional. There's a focus on these the updates that have happened where we think something's down, but it's just being updated or being fixed. But there's also contracts that are being ended, and so that's like leads to the concern for whether or not there's going to be a place to have that data, and so that's led to some scares. And then the fourth thing that I would add is the lack of staffing, and this is a big one for me, is that it's not so much that the data's gone, but the people who steward the data are gone. And we've seen instances where because there's no one behind in the agency anymore who has that data expertise, that things deprecate. And so having an understanding of how to, where that's happening, I think is another part of it. So sorry to complicate it, but it is a lot more complicated than just those two.
One answer there is we shouldn't necessarily differentiate between those if we use this as a prompt to think about stewardship in general. I had a conversation with someone who works in the government who said, look, you have to understand that no one can archive themselves. And she said this, I didn't, but it was every library's archive of themselves is their worst archive. And she said that she's certainly seen that in government, that it's not workable to expect people to preserve their own data. It's a different skill set, and the government has restrictions that make that even harder. And so when we were archiving data.gov back in November, December, there was lots of link rot already, just things that were supposed to be there that weren't there anymore. As any one of us would assume, 300,000 links, of course, a lot of them aren't going to work. And that's actually just as bad for our patrons as if someone took it down intentionally. If it's gone, it's gone. So I think we can shift from saying what is gone intentionally to really like what is necessary to keep and what systems are going to build to keep it. Yeah, I had another thought, but I'll leave that there.
And I guess I just want to join Linda in further complicating this. In addition to data that there's no longer stewards of this, there's a huge problem right now with communications that we should be receiving that are no longer being received. Like it was just announced last week that the CDC has not been releasing newsletters since March, even though diseases have continued to be a problem. So there's and that's a tricky thing because you can't point to like, look, this was here in this place now, and now it's gone. But that's also a loss, and that can be incredibly difficult to measure.
Yes, one thing that's definitely happening is data collection is shifting. So like collection of demographic data is getting more narrow, and things like race or gender questions, a bunch of forms have been updated to not collect anymore. Another thing that's happening is FOIA offices aren't being staffed. So you get like, oh, the data still exists somewhere, but the person who would hand it over to you doesn't have their job.
Okay, so another question for the panel. What resources are most needed to support and sustain preservation efforts, whether that's from your individual projects or sort of your ideas in the big picture of things?
I think first I would get staff for Linda. I think the here's where we are is like we're all touching parts of the elephant. It's like it's a huge problem to preserve 2 million federal employees' output of all of the things they're seeing and giving us, which is like it's a gift to us. It's valuable information for all of us. It's a huge problem to preserve it. But there's no elephant there. Like none of us thought it was our main job to preserve stuff that the NARA was going to preserve. So we need to construct this thing, and we can do so much with volunteers, but we can't do community organizing with volunteers. You can, there's a Harvard GIS librarian who cares a lot about GIS data and would happily chip in information about GIS. But the person who keeps the spreadsheet of all the GIS librarians, that can't be a nights and weekends job. That has to be a paid job. So we need core support for the community organizers who uh, keep the lists of all the others of us who would love to help out. And that just has to be funded, and we can't keep looking and pointing at someone else to do that. Uh, and then the stuff that is around that is we need to, using that framework, um, support our whole profession in being able to contribute to the bits and pieces as part of the other work that we do. I think it'll really pay off for a GIS librarian to be in a community of other GIS librarians helping to figure out how to preserve public data. You chat with each other, throw in a little bit of advice, get answers to your things. I think we can actually use this as a nexus of a real support for the profession. Um, and so building that space is kind of feels to me like the next thing, but we can't build it on pure volunteer sweat and blood. We have to build it with resources. So I think that those are the resources that feel most key to me, and the rest of it feels downstream from that.
I don't disagree with that, but
No, do
obviously.
please. It'll wake everyone up.
But no, I think that the one thing I would add to that is I think there needs to be a mind shift about, and Danielle's comment about this is so important. I think we have taken public data for granted and government information for granted for so many years since I've been a librarian. And I've had people say to me that, oh, well, the census is always outdated, so I'll just use this vendor over here. And that's been a problem for us, I think, because that vendor depends on that public data to be able to create the kind of data that they're selling it back to us as librarians. And so we need to advocate for this government data, government information as a public good, because the government is the institution that has the resources to collect and disseminate the data in a way that no vendor can do, does not have the interest to do, and it doesn't exist to do that. So that's, I think there just has to be some, and librarians, I would say, need to move that along, to encourage people to take that, to be the advocates for that perspective, because it really, that's been what's maddening to me. I was a government docs librarian for many years, and it was always maddening to see people kind of dismiss the government documents program or the government information programs as less important. But now we're in the situation that we're in because of that.
Yeah, and the last question we have for everybody is something that I know came up a lot in our PIPers discussion, which is, a lot of people want to help and don't know how to get started, or think I don't have the coding skills or things. So how can we empower more people to get involved?
I can certainly say on our end, one of the things we've been really trying to do is just kind of make the barrier to entry as low as possible, because Jenny and I are lucky to have jobs where we are able to kind of use some of our skills to kind of analyze and clean up things that have been submitted to us. And so I've tried to just always make clear, even if you see something and you're not sure, is this really something that was taken down for nefarious reasons? I want to look into it. Because I think sometimes people can feel some insecurity about stepping into something like this. Do I really have the expertise? And I think one thing that's just really important is that just encouraging people to get involved at whatever level they're at.
I would say the same for the whatever level people are at. I mean, there are lots of people who've gotten in touch with me and said that they can't do a rescue, or they don't have the time, or it's beyond what their skill sets are. But there are other places, other ways that you can get involved, and certainly just making people aware in your family, having the family conversation, being that person at the dinner table who's annoying everybody about government information, I think is something that you can do to raise awareness for the problem.
I think there's room to join the forums where people are working on this stuff. So DRP, as that one grows, if you're interested in environmental data, PEDP has a good community. Safeguarding Research and Culture, safegar.de, which I linked, has a whole open forum. That one attracts more of like the Reddit data hoarders crowd. So it's a nice place to hang out with more of a technical community where you'll probably be the best at metadata of anyone there. So like you'll have a lot to contribute because they'll be taking on challenges that you've thought about more than they have. I think getting into a community and seeing where you can chip in is really helpful. And really, it's having more of those communities is what's going to help us to grow on that. Um, I have been thinking about kind of what is the most DIY version of this thing. And I do think there's room for exploring things like um, archiveweb.page by the Web Recorder project will let you run an app that is just a browser, a special browser that records everything you do. And I think there's room for some kind of DIY data preservation via clicking around and downloading. And we do have to figure out more ways to do that. Um, I think we do struggle with this question because in doing the entire thing, I really hit like, I can't write down all of the steps of this thing. I just need to tell you to talk to 6 people. And it is going to be how do we build the places to talk to 6 people that solve this.
Thank you, everyone. One thing I want to ask is there a question that we didn't ask that you would want us to ask in this context? Because I see a lot of themes coming up that were a little bit more unexpected, and I would really love to hear if there's anything that you maybe wanted to touch on that you haven't had a chance to touch on yet. I'll take that as a no. I tried to give it the 30 seconds of awkward silence. I couldn't. I don't think I could get there. That's okay. So we have a couple of questions lingering in the chat, but not too many. We have 8 minutes left, so please feel free to add some questions. Going way back to near the beginning, Alan had asked at one point, do you think if Universal Music Group versus Internet Archive is decided against the Internet Archive, if that would negatively impact the Wayback Machine?
I think we really don't appreciate what fundamental infrastructure the Internet Archive is and how slender that read is. And I'm not part of the Internet Archive. I certainly can't speak for their finances. I think it's never good to lose a web litigation for a lot of damages. I know there's a lot of us who care a lot about it, so I imagine there'll be a lot of support for it too if there is a bad judgment. Um, but look, in many countries, there is a national library that has the purpose and mission of mandatory deposit for the web and tries to collect the web of their country. In the United States, we depend on a nonprofit in a church in San Francisco to do what is done by national libraries in many countries. And they do that admirably well, and it's not the only thing they do admirably well. There's so many kinds of archive that they step up and do single-handedly. So on the one hand, boy, we have to fight for them if they do get hit by judgments. And on the other hand, it's sort of become a principle for my lab to not try to use them only because that's the easy option, and we can't all be doing that anymore. We need to have not just one slender read. So I really think we need to think like, what can we bring to the table that will make this thing more resilient than, oh, thank God there's Brewster Kahle running the Internet Archive and he can do the parts that are too hard for us.
Thanks, Jack. Linda, did you want to add something? Okay. So we have a couple Q&As also. So the first is from an anonymous attendee. I'm curious about the methods being used to acquire the data. Have there been problems with any specific method? For instance, my commercial organization runs Python robot scrapers on multiple federal and state administrative agencies. And recently we were specifically blocked by a federal board site. We found a commercial workaround, but we anticipate this happening more often with federal agencies. What happens when archiving efforts are actively blocked?
I mean, I can speak to this for DRP, and we've run into this quite a bit. We've definitely almost brought down some APIs, I think, or been blocked from some APIs in the work we've been doing. I mean, you're welcome to if you do want to come in and talk to our people. We have a group that is doing this with a particular agency right now and running into issues, and so you could share and we have a whole channel just for technical discussion. So thinking about DRP as a place to ask these kinds of questions, I think is one way to think about us. But for us, we have run into situations where we're being blocked. In some cases, we've been able to find people we can in the agency that we can talk to about what's going on. That's rarer than in other cases where we have actually. Data Lab is a good example of this. That it's a dashboard for Department of Education, and we've gone in and just downloaded tables one by one manually to be able to have something, because there's no way that we can get the data programmatically. It just isn't possible for us to do. So that's the benefit of having 800 people signed up as volunteers, is to be able to kind of get do a manual process. But there are challenges with that as well.
We've found this with web archiving running PermaCC as well, our link route fighting tool for courts and law journals. The AI moment has completely changed the stance of many web pages towards archival, and they're not specifically trying to block us, they're trying to block crawlers that destroy them, but they block us too. And I do think that our community is going to hit a kind of just being excluded almost by accident. And the commercial options are interesting but sketchy, because like a lot of them, it's hard to validate that the routes that they're using to get around the blocks are not just running spyware on someone's phone. And with Perma, we haven't found a way to like get comfortable enough with one of the circumvention options that we know that we can run it and stand behind it. I think we may have to at some point, because the blocking is getting more and more intense.
All right, we have another question in the Q&A. Have people been sharing these things internationally? We shared the Wayback Machine plugin with some UK partners recently.
Yes, there's a very big international contingent. Safeguarding Research and Culture is one. Sucho, members of Sucho is another. And when I say they're contingent, I mean people who are actively interested in what's going on in this country and want to help out. And they've been doing a lot of press internationally as well. So spreading the word in France, Germany, Netherlands, all of those countries have had articles about the efforts that are going on here in the United States. For a while, I only saw DRP in French newspapers before kind of hit the United States. So the international community is quite interested, not only because they care about the data we're collecting. And I'll give you a great example of this. I went to a session that was talking about the demographic and health surveys that were collected by the USAID. And someone from the UN was there talking about how most of the indicators for the Sustainable Development Goals for Africa, the data was based on the demographic and health surveys that were run by the USAID. Without that data, the UN does not have information about African countries. So it's critical for more than just the US. It's a very big problem internationally. In addition to that, there's also the other angle of it, which is other countries, this could happen too. And so how do we create an infrastructure that is replicable in other countries that could be used in, say, Hungary or countries that might be experiencing similar situations?
Okay, we have 1 minute. I'm going to ask the last question. Have some of the federal data stewards, perhaps especially those who've lost their jobs, found and reached out to any of you about these projects?
I think we will be working with people who lost their jobs, but I don't have anything to announce yet.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. I'm going to put on a quick slide here. So this will have a little bit of information, so you can visit our YouTube page. This will be uploaded hopefully in a few days after the recording is completed. And we also have a QR code here on the left. If you wouldn't mind providing feedback on this webinar, that would be wonderful. I want to thank all of our speakers and my wonderful co-hosts for putting on this webinar today. Godor and Pippers have a really nice long history of working very well together on these types of initiatives, and it's been really great to work with everybody on this. So, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your day to attend, and look forward to the recording, and have a great day.
Thanks for having us. Putting it on.
Thanks, Linda. I'll probably be in touch for your help uploading everything to YouTube.
Okay. I think you'll have access now. So
Okay, I will give it a try.
okay. If not, let me know. Let me know. Sorry if I'm
Thanks.
slow
I'm
on
so sorry
answering.
that we always bug you about that too.
No, no worries, no worries.
Heather, Jennifer will be in touch with just all the things, feedback and the recording and everything like that.
Yeah.
And Kelly and Danielle, thank you so much for helping with the tech side.
Thank you so much for getting to use your infrastructure for this.
Yay.
Versus
Yes.
us trying to do it on our own. So I think it was,
Yeah.
I think it was super great.
This was great. I've already gotten some chats on the side from other folks who were attending. So thank you.
The biggest number I saw was 195 on at one time.
Yep.
Thank you
Yeah,
all
I
so
think
much for organizing.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
Molly, for coming. It was so great to have you talk about your work. Keep it up. I really admire it, because there have been times where I was like, is anybody doing this? Like,
That's where
should
we
I
came
just
from.
start? Like, should I just start doing this?
Yep. Yeah, thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, you too. And thanks, Julia, for persisting.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank
You
you.
too.